All right, welcome back to a brand new episode of the Bold American Podcast presented by Barstool Sports. My background looks a little different. I am currently away from the house, and ever since watching the show Your Friends and Neighbors, I'm so hesitant to share with people when I'm not at home for fear of being robbed. And maybe that's just me being neurotic because I don't think there's anything in my house that's upwards of hundreds of $1,000s like in the show, but that's neither here nor there. We got a very, 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 very special show though for you today because Ryan and I had the opportunity to sit down with the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, the Honorary Doug Collins. It was an unbelievable interview, unbelievable conversation. I came away from the conversation just thinking so much more about the gentleman, and I can't wait for everybody to listen to it. So we're absolutely going to throw it to that. We have to obviously talk about what's going on right now in Iran. It is Monday, June 23rd, 8:40 at night, and I recognize that by tomorrow morning when you're listening, things will probably change again, but we're going to talk about the last 72 hours, which has been crazy, crazy, crazy. And the good news is all of that, I'm very excited to announce, all of that is going to be brought to you by our new presenting sponsor of Bold American, and that is HeyDude. So have you tried HeyDude shoes yet? They're like anything I have ever worn. I get introduced to them at the Barstool mini golf tournament. I guess it was like 2-3 months ago, whatever that was. And I kept asking like, hey, can I keep these? Can I keep these? Because they are like the perfect ultimate slip-on shoe and the foundation of comfort. So they're lightweight, breathable, ridiculously comfortable. Cushioned insoles are completely game-changing. They're excellent for me in the suburbs when I'm just running in and out of the house and I need to just throw some shoes on to run some errands. They are perfect for that. And they look cool too. So go to heydude.com/barstool to experience your own version of HeyDude Country all summer long. And we are pleased to have HeyDude joining the Bold American team. And with that, Ryan, welcome. How are you doing? Last 72, talk to me.
I'm doing good. My last 72 was spent where your current 72 is being spent. I actually wore my Avalon or Nowhere shirt, sweatshirt for you. So, just it's a cool 100 degrees here in Philadelphia today. Couldn't get outside to do anything because it is literally that hot. So when Rob is talking about how he's just like isolated inside his house in Vegas, like I get it. I got up at 6:30 to go for a run this morning. I walked outside and I turned right back around and came back in because it was that hot. So yeah, again, just super excited for everybody to hear the interview with Secretary Collins. It was just such an honor to sit down with him and, loved how excited he was to be in the Barstool studio in New York. And yeah, it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, everybody will hear. He's just a very, very normal individual. For being a cabinet secretary, he seemed very normal. And we were chatting afterwards about football and Georgia football. And it was very cool. Just a very humanizing individual. Speaking of the heat, Sands, what's it like on a ship? I mean, I have to imagine that's all pretty regulated in terms of the temperature, or does it get like uncomfortable on ships as well? Like in the living quarters, maybe it's worse. I don't know.
Terrible. The walls start to sweat.
Oh, really?
When you're out to sea and you're in those hot, humid areas, the walls literally start to sweat, and then you get yelled at by the chief, "Hey, we got to paint the walls again because it's starting to crack the paint." No, it's like it literally just leaks. Like you'll be dripping in sweat, and also look around and it's just coming down the walls because it's trying to keep the ship cool. But no, the living quarters, they're a disaster. It stinks so bad. I'm talking like because we have all of our laundry bags hanging at the end of the aisles. It's like it's uncomparable to anything I've ever smelled.
Oh, so it starts smelling like a locker room, essentially.
Yeah. Well, no, it starts smelling like a locker room on your normal days, Cons. This is escalated times 100 when it gets heat and sweaty, and then now you got sweaty socks going into sweaty bags, and there's nothing you can do about that smell. They try to.
I would have thought but we built our ships in such a way that we could just have AC cranking the entire time. I never even thought about it.
Recruiters tell you, yeah, that's what the recruiters tell you. That's how you're going to be air conditioned, have your own rack on top of, 2 other guys, and you get to smell their laundry and then get out and smell it all. Oh yeah, it's terrible.
Are subs any better?
So I've only ever toured submarines, and obviously if you're just touring them, they're not out to sea. But I
Right.
imagine no, because there's some people, especially on those fast attacks, that like they rotate in and out. So like there'll be one person sleeping in your rack while you're out on shift for your 8 hours.
Uh-huh.
Or let me see, yeah, because they do 3 8-hour shifts depending on
Mhm.
what you're on. And then you'll go back and you're switching out the sheets to sleep in that same rack. So I don't know, because
Ew.
they're underwater, most of the time too. So maybe the heat doesn't affect them as much.
I
But
would
I
just
don't
think,
like
yeah,
that,
like
that water
further
out
you
in Dubai.
go,
I mean,
further
Dubai
you
water's
go,
like,
yeah.
yeah.
But like you go beneath the surface, and it just gets colder and colder. So I would think it would be decent. I don't know. But anyway, yeah. I am down the South Jersey Shore, which is not where I normally go. I'm down here in Stone Harbor, and I had a thought. I tweeted it the other day, Ryan. I'm curious to get your thoughts. I don't know how much time you spent up in like the Lavalette to, we'll say, Seabright area. But like up in that area where I normally go, to me, that feels like the Jersey Shore, where the towns here feel more like vacation-y type towns that people don't really spend time all year round. And it's more just like, hey, we go there in the summer. Is that how you
It's
feel about this area
it's
or what?
completely accurate.
Yeah.
Avalon and Stone Harbor are multi-million-dollar houses that are basically vacant for 9 months out of the year. So
Mhm.
hold on one second, guys. My fucking dog. Hold on. It's very different. It is, and it's actually gotten worse. I will tell you. I mean, comparatively so, if you want to say worse or better, but like it has very much become like a resort. They are resort type
Yeah.
towns. Stone Harbor and
Yeah.
Avalon most especially. Yeah. And the houses keep getting bigger and bigger. And it's there used to be a Stone Harbor Elementary and an Avalon Elementary. Now there's just one because the year-round people have just they're
Been
just moving
priced
out.
out.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
being priced
Yeah.
out for sure. When you're getting
Yeah.
offered $5 million, $6 million on your 3-bedroom rancher, you're like, sure, I'll go.
And that's the other thing too. It's like so many of these houses here, and this is what you come to Bold American for, is the real estate talk. They're like generational homes, right? Where, when it was purchased in 1960, it wasn't worth $3 million, but you hold on to something long enough and those prices go up. And now all of a sudden, sorry to be morbid, but grandma dies. And then, the family wants to sell the house, and all of a sudden they got something really pricey on their hands. So I think that's just a sign of the times.
I mean, if I could tell you the stories I know of people who are like literally leaving handwritten notes at older people's doors in Avalon and Stone Harbor, like, hey,
Yeah.
this is what we can do for you. It's actually kind of wild.
Yeah.
And I've
Yeah.
seen it work too. So
I believe it. Yeah, I
yeah.
believe it. The deal is too sweet to pass up. But speaking of handwritten notes, in a way, we kind of gave Iran a handwritten note with 3 massive bunker buster, or however many bunker buster bombs. Say that 12 times fast. And the latest in Iran, as of right now, I think, is that it was announced that Israel and Iran have agreed to peace talks. We'll see what comes of that. But Ryan, I'm just kind of curious, with everything that went on with Iran in the last like 48, 72 hours, what were your feelings on what was going on over there?
I mean, I'm going to not dive into the politics of all this. Should we have done it? Should we not have done it? I'm not even going to get into that.
We did it. We did it.
Yeah,
We did
yeah,
it. Let's just talk
exactly.
about it. Like it happened. We did it. Like, yeah, I don't care about the politics. Like, should we not have? We did. So let's
But what
talk
I
about
am going to say is like, it's quite remarkable that we flew these jets out of Missouri, right? 37 hours and completely undetected. I mean, when you think about the capability of what we were able to do, it's pretty remarkable. And seeing them come back in, I mean, I don't know. There was definitely a sense of pride. I was like, holy crap, that's
1,000%,
wild.
because every other time we see a B2, it's usually like the Super Bowl for the flyover, or
right.
a big game.
Right.
And obviously that's very, very safe. And I don't think, because I'll admit, like, maybe I've looked it up before, I did not realize the capabilities of that bomber and the range that it had, that they could go on a 36-hour mission. And I also never really gave thought to it. It's just 2 pilots in there. So however they do that
Yeah,
is
well,
remarkable as well.
I mean, they said they had like a cooler in there, they had a toilet, like and the one thing that I kept thinking about the whole time was what were the conversations they were having on the way there and then on the way home when they're just like, they're just flying home and 36, 37 hours, and what are the conversations that are being had? And then on top of that, it's like the families, right? Where like they may not absolutely know that it was their son, daughter, husband, wife that were in those bombers, but what they did know is that they were gone. So they knew in some capacity they were probably played a role in what was happening. And just to like think about that. And obviously as a military parent and a military child, military sibling, like I think about all those things. And I think about like the families and what they're thinking right now. And then I think about the families on all these forward operating bases. And, if I had a child that was, forward deployed in Qatar or any of these other places in the Middle East, like it's a scary time. So, for me,
but you have to take some relief in hearing the report that Iran fired 14 missiles at one of our bases and we shot down 13 of them. And one of them went in a different direction. Like,
right.
Now to all our ADA fellas and ladies doing that work, because I think for the longest time, at least in my circles, we would give the ADA guys a hard time just based on the nature of their job. But now you see like how important it is to be able to protect yourselves against incoming missiles. So credit and shout out to them for doing their jobs exceptionally, basically perfect. But you're right. That is very, very scary to think about. We're not in Iraq and Afghanistan anymore, but there is still very much dangerous people out there trying to do harm against forward deployed soldiers, sailors, Marines, and those jobs are still very dangerous. So I can only imagine. And I'm kind of curious, like, we said, hey, they're talking about peace treaty. Where do you land in terms of what's going on in the world relative to your daughter who's going to commission into either the Navy or the Marines? Or she already decided like it's one or the other?
She has interest in one particular service branch.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I think about all of the cadets and midshipmen that that just graduated this year. Right. And some of them are already forward deployed, are doing different things. And so, I mean, again, we're in a volatile world. It's naive to think that that there's not going to be conflict and that there's not going to be things happening. For me, I think this idea that it's that we're taking care of things that could be much larger problems in the future, I don't know, is quite reassuring to me. But, I just get back to the idea that I don't think people fully understand the thousands and thousands of troops that are deployed all across the world,
Right.
And so I think it's like all of a sudden this wake up call for people like, oh, wait, what, so, I just have a real soft spot for families that have loved ones that are not stateside. And again, I think on top of that, I think it's also imperative for us to stay vigilant here in the United States. I don't know if anybody, and I don't want to digress too much, but if anybody listened to that Sean Ryan interview, and the woman's name is escaping me, but she talks about all these sleeper cells that are here in the United States. And so I went back and was like re-listening to some of the clips, and I don't know, scary times.
Yeah, it is very scary. But in terms of like graduating into, I just don't see us. Maybe this is naive. Maybe this is hopeful and wishful thinking. Don't see us getting involved in conflicts that resemble Iraq and Afghanistan. Or at least I hope that we don't get ourselves involved in these ground wars. If we are in fact in conflicts with other countries, other ideologies, entities, whatever. I just hope it doesn't resemble that once again. I have a hard time believing that history would repeat itself so closely behind the 20 years we were in Iraq and Afghanistan. But again, maybe that's naive. Maybe that's just wishful thinking, but I just don't see that happening. I don't feel like what I do think what we've displayed in the last 72 hours is, I just don't think it's wise for countries to try to go toe to toe with us. Now, certainly there are terrorist organizations that do not give a rip and are not scared and will battle us to their own deaths. So that is a very real possibility, but I don't know. I just don't envision Iraq and Afghanistan repeating themselves, not at least in the short term. So in my opinion, my professional opinion, which means nothing, Ryan, maybe you could take a little solace in the fact that I don't know that your daughter's going to be thrust into a conflict anytime soon. Anyway.
Well, certainly hope not.
Yeah. So yeah, anyway, it seems like things in Iran are going in the right direction.
Wait, Connor, a question for you. Is it Iran
yes.
or is it Iran?
Oh,
because
that's that's kind of like pecan and pecan. I don't know.
Is it? I don't know. I'm thinking it's Iran, but I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah, it might be. It might
Okay.
be. Sneaky, one of my favorite movies in the last 15 years is Argo with Ben Affleck. And I think maybe I mentioned it at some point, but I read that guy's book, and everything that happened in the movie was just so over Hollywood-ified. And it wasn't as daring a rescue, but it was still pretty daring. So let me not take anything away. Anyway, I digress, because guess what? When people do serve, they come out of the military and they are veterans, and they are treated by Veterans Affairs. And for as long as this faction of Barstool Sports has existed, this military and veteran arm, we've wanted to sit down with the Secretary of VA, because for so long now, I think veterans, especially post 9/11 veterans, have largely been angry with VA and not pleased with the service that they've received, and had a lot of gripes and have not felt like they've been heard. I think with this new Secretary Collins, I'm hopeful for the first time that things could be different. And I will leave it at that, and I will allow everybody else to make their judgments based on the conversation. But let's go listen to that interview right now. All right. Joining us now on Bold American, presented by Barstool Sports, is an incredibly special guest. This is the first time in the history of Barstool Sports we have had a sitting member, or any member for that matter, of the president's cabinet on any of our shows across the Barstool universe. And of course, we are sitting here, as you can see, with Secretary of Veterans Affairs, the Honorable Douglas Collins. Sir, welcome to the show.
I'm glad to be here at Barstool. It's so fun, and this show is going to be great. So
yes,
it'll be fun.
And I mean, we can hear it in your voice. You're not from New York City or the New York area.
No, Northern Maine sort of gave it away.
Right. But you were telling us a little bit about your trip so far, and what do you make of being a Southern boy here in New York City?
I've come to enjoy it over time, because I come up here and do media a good deal, especially over the last few years. It's different. I tell you one thing, and this may sound, you probably have heard this before. I would come before COVID, and it was a sort of a different feel. And then coming back after COVID, after I had started coming back up here, the city was different. It was just and I again, not being here every week, but it was just different. There's a harder edge to it. And it was always New York. I mean, the multiple ways that y'all can use the language that we do not use in Georgia on a regular basis is amazing. But we just, that was the only difference. I love being in New York. I love the city. It's one of those, as a kid in Georgia growing up with the Troopers Dad, we didn't travel a lot, so I always just read through books, and so it's always fun being here. But coming back it's a neat place. I loved it, and we got a lot of great veterans up here. We got a lot of good people who serve, and so it's good for us.
Massive veteran population here in New York City, and certainly that's a very big focus for you, and very different. And certainly my co-host Ryan, being from Philadelphia, another big veteran contingent there. So one thing I really want to start on, though, is you are unique in that
I've been described many ways. At least we're starting off good there.
No,
unique gets that. Okay.
I mean this in the most polite and respectful way. You are unique in that you are a post 9/11 veteran.
Yes.
And you are the first person to hold your position with that distinction. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that?
I think it puts me in a great position to do what I do. They've described it as me being uniquely qualified for this job, and I think in many ways it's not something I ever thought, oh, one day I'm going to grow up and be VA secretary. But I think life experiences are the thing that get you where you need to be. And for me, being a pastor, being a chaplain, being in both the Navy and the Air Force now for 24 years, serving in Balad, Iraq, and being in the legislative side, both on the state level and then in Congress in a very high profile for 8 years there, has put me in a position to understand how we can get things done. And also not to be, and this may sound strange, I'm not in awe of Washington. I'm in love with our country.
Right.
And I'm in love with what I believe Washington can be.
Right.
But it doesn't, I'm not overwhelmed by it because I know we can get stuff done, but I also know it's a real work. So I think for me, having that 9/11 experience, having that burn pit experience, having that talking with guys that I was serving with who were thinking about taking their own life, having that experience matters, and it matters in a real context because we're experiencing a difference in our veteran population. And I've described this, I even described it to Congress, is that we have the older veterans, which are just our heroes, the World War II guys, the Korea, Vietnam, and then what I call sort of the silent era, that's from 70s into 80s, had a little bit of stuff, Grenada and Panama, but then you had Desert Storm, and that's where it sort of kicked back in again, and then, of course, 9/11. But there's a difference generationally. The younger generation, the millennials, the X, for me being X generation, it's just, there's a different why we relate to the world. So for me, I think there's been a lot of focus on our older veterans, as they should be. Mm-hmm. But we've got to gain the trust of younger veterans. And they do not join. They're not joiners. I mean, they're joining podcast networks. They don't join and respect to my friends at the American Legion, VFW, and all these. They're great organizations, and I would hope they would get in and change them, and be there, take their part in them. But they're just loners. They look for ways to do stuff. I think we've talked about this. They want to be a part of an organization or at least something that they feel like they're still moving. So for me, I think it's a good bridge between the two.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And you point out that we are unique, and I think the story has been so long that the gentlemen and women from previous generations utilized the VA because that was just what they did. Mm-hmm. And now you have our post 9/11 generation where the attitude around VA has been VA is jacked up.
Yep.
Don't use VA. How do you wrestle with that?
Every day. Well, I think really what we got to look at here is I'm going to take it a different fold. And I made this very clear on the Hill. We're no longer the whipping post of the Hill. Okay, for years the VA is the whipping post of the Hill. If a member of Congress wanted to show they're good for their veterans, well, the VA is not being good enough, and I'm going to hold them accountable, and then at the same time giving it money and people, but never holding, frankly, I'm going to be frank, never holding it accountable.
Right.
But it sounds good on a soundbite. That's where my Hill side comes in. Mm-hmm. I know what those are. I can do a 5-minute video like anybody else, or do questioning. But the question is, are we actually making a difference? So I think one of the things that I've found and new but found is we've got an outstanding workforce actually. In a lot of our hospitals, I was just up in the Bronx yesterday.
Yeah, Bronx, VA, sure.
I mean, my God, they were doing psychedelic stuff that is actually making a difference. I'm excited about what I saw up there. They do an MDMA trial, talk to a veteran who went through it. It's going into other areas that I've been to where they're doing some similar trials. Again, I don't think it's a cure-all for everybody. Mm-hmm. I don't think but is it for some? Yes. And if that means it's some, then let's use it. Let's at least study it more. But also in that same place, you have our prosthetics and our spinal cord injuries. I mean, there's things that we do, frankly, better than anybody else. But because we're a government agency, mm-hmm. because we have that stigma of, they can't get a job anywhere else. I take offense at that. Well, we got a lot of great doctors who could regularly work anywhere and they want to,
sure.
But they choose to do research and work with us. So I think it's going to take me being out there. I've been in 16 or 17 states in a little over 4 months, 50, 60 of our facilities. I'm going to continue to do this. And everywhere I go, I'm going to say, look, number one, veterans, if you're out there, you've had a bad experience, give us another shot. And if something wrong, let me know. Number one, there's ways to let me know. There's ways to take us up the chain. And I'm telling our employees, this is not about the VA. This is about the veteran. You're a service organization And you got to understand that a service organization cares about the people who walk through the door. And that's what we're doing every day. And all I can do is say, trust us, at least, but verify me. I don't ever say trust my words, just verify it.
So you say, if you're having a bad experience, if you had a bad experience, like there are ways to let us know.
Yep.
What are the ways? Because I think that's the biggest thing when we put a kind of a call out to our audience, like, what do you want to hear? And that was the biggest thing. You know, I've been waiting. I'm a Korean War veteran, been waiting 12 months for, paperwork to be processed for VA benefits. Like, how do they let you know?
Well, I think there's a lot of ways to let us know.
Yeah.
And I think this is one. Look, they can always, if they're in real desperate need, call the crisis line. It's always there. 988, they can always call that, hit 1, and they can direct them to where they need to go. There's also our websites. There's places we can go. But also, this is something we're expanding on that we've never really done before, and that is in our social media apparatus. We have what we call a VA rapid response. People were responding to me because, number one, I'm no disrespect to my previous secretaries, I'm not sure any of them actually knew Twitter, much less used Twitter.
Right.
But I've had from Congress and everything, so we have a pretty 600,000. We have a pretty large following out there. Follow me because you'll keep up with what we're doing here. But also my Sec VA account, we're keeping everybody updated. But what I saw early on is people were commenting. Just like you said, I've been waiting. So what we're doing is we're going to those comments and we're raising them up. We're making contact with them.
Love it.
And look, I say this with love. Don't be a jerk.
Sure.
On a comment. And if you say
that's easier said than done on the social media in 2025, but I appreciate that sentiment, sir.
And I just say that with love. Don't go in there and say this place treated me like crap,
right?
And then not give us the place, not give us the next situation. But if you got legitimate help, we're gonna try and find you.
Yeah.
So that's one of the bigger ways that we're doing this. And of course, there's always to reach out to Congress. There's your members. I'm trying to get away. My hope is that one day a veteran will never have to call their member of Congress to get the help they need because we're doing it right the first time.
Yeah.
When they have to call the Congress, we failed. And I've said this to veterans and VA employees all over the place. And some of our VA employees first looked at me like, yeah, we failed. Think about this. You don't go to McDonald's, not get your hamburger, and call your congressman.
That's true.
But yet they do here because it's open to them to do that, and I'm fine to do it. But we should be doing it better the first time because any other business would go out of business if we were not taking care of the very customer we're supposed to be. And it's a client. We have a client called a veteran.
So let's talk about just shifting really quickly to the client. There was an article that just came out in The Guardian that read doctors at Department of Veterans Affairs nationwide could refuse treatment to unmarried veterans and Democrats under new hospital guidelines imposed following an executive order by Donald Trump. The VA calls this change a formality. You guys came out, again, credit to you guys on social media. You guys came out right away and said, this is nonsense.
It is nonsense.
But why don't you kind of walk us through what they're specifically talking about and why it's not true?
I can. And look, when we responded to the executive order about and making sure that we're not, the getting away from some of our policies, DI policies, other things that we're doing, it was just simply cleaning up language. Number one, let me just start right here. We're not discriminating against anybody. There's federal law. There's VA policy. It's just, you make language inclusive so that everybody's involved. Then you have, basically junk rags like The Guardian that decide that they want to just make up a story.
Right.
And let me take it past The Guardian a little bit. This is fact. Every Monday, Tuesday morning, I have a meeting with my senior leadership every morning, 8 o'clock. My person who is over all of my OPI, my public information section comes in, and this is if it's not happening on Monday, it's typical by Tuesday. New York Times, Washington Post, ProPublica, now The Guardian, are each doing, and it's sir, well, they're doing another hit piece every week.
Right.
Now, most every article, and I don't almost say every article comes out. Before they do it, we give them the rebuttal, we tell them they're full of crap, and then they'll still write the article. So what we're trying to figure out here is why are they so against veterans, or why are they so protective of employees over veterans? And I think this is where it just is killing me. I can't say no enough. It's all what kills me about The Guardian. It reminds me of the old LBJ quote when we are on podcasts, and he was getting a meeting and they were talking about his upcoming election, and he said, "I want to say that my opponent had sex with a goat." And his people said, you can't say that. You can't say. He said, look, I don't think it. He said, it's not true. He said, I don't know if it's true. He said, I just want to see him deny it.
Yeah.
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 And I'm beginning to believe that some of these folks just want to throw stuff out because they want to see us deny it. And that's the part that hurt. But let me be very candid. We've had members of Congress, we've had senators, we've had representatives who have retweeted this article, who have basically said, why is this happening, SecVA? Why are the... We have said it. Oh, you look at our social media. We have been upfront. We have called them out. They actually started this story on a different story that we actually did get them to stop because it was so. And this was actually more outlandish. The Guardian is now doing an internal investigation. Of course, they're never going to have the guts enough to pull this article like they should. But what happens is somebody is out there who reads that headline.
Yeah.
A veteran who may have had that bad experience that we talked about earlier, or a veteran that's never been a part. And they say, yeah, it's just the VA. Okay, here's what I'm saying. If your social media team, and because I'm not crazy enough to think that these senators actually compose their own tweets, but their social media team was so uncaring enough to put something out there in the public sphere that keeps a veteran away from a hospital, keeps a veteran away from a clinic, or a veteran away from calling the VA because of this bull crap, then you are hurting my veterans. You are the problem. You're the problem we're trying to fight. So either help us or just basically hush. I don't need you killing us in these ways. So this is the part that I'm furious about this because it's not true. But at the end of the day, they don't care. They either want Donald Trump or Doug Collins. They don't like us, whatever it is. But I want them to think for a minute about Jim, Susie, Joe out in the middle of Arizona or the middle of Kansas or the middle of Utah who looks at this and says, or in New York City who says, well, I'll just go find it on my own. I can't tolerate that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to consider the source. I mean, immediately when I saw that headline, I looked at the Guardian. I was like, oh, well, that's fake. But I think a lot of people don't come to that conclusion, and they see a headline, and many of them don't get beyond the headline. And you understand that these news organizations, I use news lightly, are in a business, so they're trying to drive clicks, and it is business. But this is a real situation that you have to deal with every day, and that's compounded by social media. So how is it that you are doing a good job of trying to meet veterans where they are, especially this post 9/11 generation, online, social media? How do you combat and wrestle with balance, meeting veterans where they are on social media while also combating all of this nonsense every day?
I think it's one and the same. I think they actually see us fighting. And going on podcasts, going on, you being up here, which I'm glad to be a part. Sean Ryan, we've been doing. I mean, I've been with Cam Haynes. I mean, we're doing. I'm doing media that Secretary of VA probably don't. That office has never even heard of before.
100%.
Because I want people to hear us in different venues, and I go out and I'm working with other influencers. We had a group of our Army influencers in the other day who are just They're nuts. I love them. I mean, they're great. And, and we go out and do this. But also, I think when I'm calling it out, because here's the other issue. The president's taught us this a little bit, that we've had this culture in D.C. and this culture, especially among, parties, and especially I'd say conservatives, and I'll just say it because I'm speaking for myself, that we just sort of sit back and take it.
Sure.
Well, the president sort of said, he used that New Yorker mentality. He knows if I can take it.
Yeah.
And so and look, if we're wrong, let me just be very clear out there. I am not arrogant enough to say that we're wrong. In fact, the VA is not perfect. I'm not perfect. If we make a mistake, I'm going to tell you we make a mistake. I'm going to tell you we're going to correct it. I'm going to tell you, here's how we do it. Thank you for bringing it to me. I may not like you. I may disagree with you. You may not hate me, but we're going to get it right for our veteran. So, but if you're going to lie about us, if you're going to promote false information, if you're going to put your political agenda because you just disagree with us, but cause it to do something else, then I'm going to call you out. And we have a big enough social media platform to do that across all spectrums. We do, Twitter, Instagram, the whole 9 yards that we use, plus me doing video straight to camera, YouTube and everything else, to say, look, we're not going to let you do this anymore. So I think that's how we do it, because they're looking for, I think the 9/11, and especially our generation, they want to see somebody fight.
Yes.
And not fight just to be cantankerous, but fight to say if somebody says something that is wrong, call it out. But also be willing to say, hey, we got this one wrong.
Yeah. And
we're going to fix it. And we've done that as well.
Mm-hmm. I think it's huge, and I think you make such a good point when you say, articles like this, which again, credit, I didn't catch this article from The Guardian tweeting it out. I caught it from the VA office saying this is not true right away, within minutes of it coming out. And I think you make such a great point by saying, like, it's not hurting you. It's not hurting the president. It's not hurting anyone in D.C. It's hurting the veteran that could get confused and think that this is true and then not utilize what the VA has to offer.
Yeah, look, I'm been in Washington a while, and I've been in state politics. So I pastored a church for 11 years. Okay, somebody asked, how did you get into politics? You ever been at a Baptist deacons meeting? Okay, you learn really quick. Okay, I think there are two things that are important for anybody in public life. Number one, you have to have a tender heart. But number two, you have to have a very leather back. If you lose either one of those, you're in trouble. Or if you go to one over the other, you're in trouble. You got to have both. If you're too tender-hearted, you're gonna get run over, and you're gonna get burned out. If you're too what I call leather-backed, if you're too hardened, you're gonna be hardened, and you're not gonna be sensitive to those around you.
Yeah.
You got to have things have to break your heart, and you have to have a turtle back, so to speak, to get you to help them. And for me, I've said this before. You can say whatever you want to about me. My wife's going to love me. My little Shih Tzu puppy's going to love me. My kids think I'm okay most of the time. Okay? So I'm fine.
Right.
I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And if it's about the veteran, we're going to do that. But it is going back to who we're, again, Washington sometimes forgets who we hurt. Or who we serve is probably a better way to look at it.
Right.
Yeah.
And these folks out there, they get up and go to work. They get up and go have jobs. They're out here doing real labor. They're out here doing, the hard part of raising families, sending them to school, getting them going, hoping they can get them to a vacation, hoping they can get them to camp. We've got to look at it from a veteran perspective and a constituent perspective to say, it's not about us. It's about how can we make it better for them. Mm-hmm. And we have legitimate disagreements all the time. I mean, we got big stuff passed bipartisan when I was in Congress, and we disagreed on everything except the issues we're dealing with. Mm-hmm. Why can't we go back to that? Yeah. And the veterans should be an area where we should. But what we have found is sometimes the answer is let's just put money and people to it. We've shown that doesn't work.
Right. And it seems like, evident by you sitting down with us, doing all the different social media hits and doing things differently, it seems like you are willing to do things as a whole differently, and you're not content to just say, well, we're going to do it this way because that's just how the VA's always operated. So what do you make of tearing down the red tape, tearing down the bureaucracy, and going out there and doing things differently, working with industry to leverage technology maybe that's already out there, that's being used by veterans or by organizations to improve health or social care? How do you tear down the attitude of bureaucracy and red tape, and this is just how it's always been in the VA?
Yeah, by leading. I'm a lead. I feel I definitely know I am not the most handsome man in the world. I'm definitely not the most athletic man in the world. I'm not the best speaker in the world, but I can get a point across and get to lead people and say, look, we got to look at something different, and I'll do stuff, and I'm willing to take the errors for it. What we got to do is just show it. And so in my office every day, it is, I sound like at times I sort of joke and say, I sound like a 4-year-old toddler again. Why? Why do we do this? The first week or so, I think they honestly thought that I was crazy, which I'm going to let them just continue to think that, and that's okay. But then they finally realized he ain't joking.
Right.
Why are we doing X? And I think this is caused them. What's really interesting is I've had some people who came back after some of those meetings and said, we never have been sort of given the permission to think outside the box. It's always policy.
Right.
And again, it sort of reminds me of that scene, and I love movies, and I use quotes all the time. If you remember the scene back in A Few Good Men,
sure.
In the part where, he says, they talk about, is in the manual when after Cruz it said, show me
where it is in the manual.
Show me where it's in the manual.
For the mess
and then he
hall.
comes right back up and says, where's the mess hall?
Right.
Well, no, we get 3 squares a day, sir.
Yes.
And it's like, we are so stuck to a book.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like, and I'm finding out more and more every day. My chief of staff said this to me. We were getting ready for an interview, and we found out something's been going on that shouldn't be. VA should be one VA, not 170 hospitals acting like their own independent hospital.
Or different VISNs even.
Yeah, different, which we're not even going to get to there. That's a whole different thing. But we found out today that each of them have their own bylaws. And I'm like, huh?
Right. Because then you're at the mercy of where do you live?
Well,
Right.
This is true. I had a veteran come to me at the White House. This was about a month ago, and told me it was a veteran event, and told me that he was just in, I think it was Salt Lake. He was getting a treatment there and had some prosthetic stuff. There was some things he was getting done there. Moved to Hampton Roads, which is in Virginia, and they told him in Hampton that the VA didn't do that. And so that's been, again, I wish I was making this up.
Sure. Because
then you could just say, he's crazy. I'm not. I mean, these are the kind of basics that we just have accepted over time to say, we don't do that, or we can't do that. So it's just really getting out and starting to cut it. Remember, red tape originally started with veterans coming to D.C. to get their claims, and they had them taped in red ribbon.
Right.
Okay, if you go back to the old story.
Yes, that's a very old story.
So,
yes.
So we're just taking scissors and cutting some of the tape because it's crazy for us. You talk about those backlogs. We've lowered the backlog from 260,000. These are disability claims over 125 days. 260,000 to getting right now under 190,000 in roughly 60 days.
That's unbelievable.
That's amazing.
And so now you're moving the process. So the quicker we get that backlog down, then we can move toward. And right now we're actually, and I've gotten my reports because I get them almost daily on where we're at. We're now processing more than we're taking in.
Great.
So this is what we've got to have. We're able to get quicker answers. We're getting better answers, and sometimes people just want an answer. Tell me yes or no.
Yeah.
And so that's been the big thing. Now, the next thing we're going to work on is our veteran appeals, our board appeals. That process is way too long. We're working that issue out. So these are the kind of things I'm just saying, get it right, get it for our veterans, and then community care. I can't go without talking about community care. This has been a problem. The previous administration basically said, we're not going to follow the law. It's sort of, not literally, but figurative, that's what they said. Mission Act wasn't going to apply. We're going to keep everybody in because they're worried about their money. This tells me it's about employees in organization than it was veterans. We want to keep money. We're scared if we send VA money out, then I've heard this, and you want to hear a funny one?
Yes, sir.
I told I was at a hospital recently and was told, I said, we got to use community care. And one of the doctors, good person, said, well, we're careful on our community care consults because we want to make sure that they get the same quality of care they get here.
Okay.
I said, well, I appreciate that. I said, but do you realize that you've just thrown dispersion on every one of your colleagues who doesn't work for the VA?
Yeah.
I said, you just basically said all of those folks are bad doctors. Mm-hmm. Well, no. I said, that's what you said. So let's get off the talking points and let's be understandingly real about what you just said. And I think it began to click. Yes, we want to have good standards in our place. But your colleague down the street at the hospital, we're going to let a veteran understand that.
Sure.
We're going to let a veteran go to that doctor and say, this doctor's treating me well. We're not going to propose our arbitrary standards on what it should be. So best medical interest is going to be, what's the best medical interest of the veteran, not the VA. Mm-hmm. So this is the kind of stuff we have to overcome. And it's difficult. But we're actually putting those doctors back out. We're actually getting people back in to see the care they can. And we're actually taking away some barriers. I mean, we could spend 3 or 4 hours when I just tell you how we're our own worst enemy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like it would be like us playing a baseball game and saying, okay, the other team, or maybe a simpler one actually, may not be baseball, but football, is we're getting ready for football. I'm so ready for football. I don't know what to do.
Go Birds.
So go Birds. Well, my Birds maybe, unless it's 28-3. But I haven't got over that yet. No.
Oh, you're in the wrong place for that game.
Yeah, I know. Whatever.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
But I can't say go Dogs because right now Philly is the professional extension of the University of Georgia.
Legitimately, yes.
So they've learned how to do it.
Yes.
You want the best, you draft the best. That's what you do. But go to football. We go into a football game, and we tell our team, we're only going to run between the tackles. It's the only way we're going to do it.
Sure.
And we're going to announce it before the game. We're only going to run between the tackles. I mean, you're setting yourself up for failure. Why do we do that? And so we've got to get better at giving ideas. We got to get better at thinking outside the box. We got to get better at being, responsive to the needs out there and not letting our past or our tradition or our policy, stop us from helping the veteran. So for me, we're opening up the playing field.
I really appreciate that you're sitting here talking about conversations you're having with doctors. You're talking about the actual issues, because I feel like for a long time, it's kind of been, I don't want to say the cover up, but nobody was actually talking about the problem. It was like, we're just going to talk about all the good stuff and, and not actually address the issues. And again, I think if you tackle them head on and you don't take this mentality of, listen, I served as a township supervisor for 12 years. And when I got in there and I started to do the why, it would be like, well, that's because that's the way we've always done it.
Bless
and I'm
your
like,
heart.
yeah, like that's the way we've always done it. And it's not working.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the part that got me. Here's a funny, I'll give you the inside on this. I started talking about the fact that we've been 10 years, GAO has said that we're basically, at risk.
Yes.
In 10 years. The response from Congress has been some good stuff, Mission Act, some Accountability Act. And then they put a lot of money in a lot of people, $100 billion. I think the number, and I may not have this correct, but I think of the budget in 2001 for the VA was somewhere around $40 billion, I believe. And I may be wrong, but I'm not real far off of that. Okay, we're at $400 billion now. I mean, that's just astronomical increase.
Sure.
And I told you already that GAO report was 10 years. Well, 10 years, we're still doing 9.1 million enrolled. But yet we got this much more employees, this much more money, and we're still at 9.1 million enrolled. And they're quick to say, but our usage is up. Well, yeah, you're getting older, so some of them use it, but they're going to also not be there forever either. But we're still doing the same way. And so it's just, why are we doing it? In a sense, it's not moving the number. And then an interesting part, I got a letter, because I've said this so many times to Congress now, they finally they're catching on. Mm-hmm. So they tried to be funny and send a letter. The two ranking members on Senate VA and House VA sent me a letter saying, well, you talk about the GA report. So, well, what are you going to do about it? And some of it was like funding level. Okay, you do realize that you just wanted to know about me, that you're the ones that do the funding. That's just what we see right now.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that is certainly a challenge to deal with those hurdles, in addition to just running VA all day, every day. But no, I'm interested to go back to the community care piece.
Yes.
Because I think so much of our veteran population are in remote areas. Mm-hmm. Or I'll take myself as an example. I live in New Jersey. So there are two VAMCs in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And I actually live relatively close to both of them. But if I were in much further south New Jersey and, maybe I was an older individual and couldn't drive my own vehicle, it would be a challenge to get to that VAMC. So you have to leverage the community care and meet veterans where they are. Is that what you're aiming to do?
Oh, definitely, mm-hmm. Definitely. And look, now is it always a difference in somebody say, well, if you do more, it's going to be more cost. Which really is, I hear a lot of times like, well, just privatize VA and it'll be cheaper. No, it really wouldn't. Frankly, mm-hmm. There's a difference, and I'll take the debates all day long. I get it. We're not privatizing the VA. Again, let me look right in the camera. No, we are not privatizing the VA. It's not happening. But there's just this move over so community care can be a little more expensive. But again, in those kind of situations, I always go back to your from Air Force, Army, Marine, Navy, Space Force, whoever. We have core principles. Okay, the absolute first number one core principle of the VA is veterans.
Yep.
Okay, so the question is if it's something dealing with a veteran, what do we deal with it? So in that situation, yes, we need to be able to provide them that access. When I was a member of Congress, this has affected me as well, because I dealt with the 60% calls to the congressmen, all are VA calls mm-hmm. related. No matter where you're at. They actually told us one time that they would not let a 80-year-old veteran who couldn't see real well go to the local optometrist to get the prescription filled. They were going to make him drive 80 miles to a VAMC location to get this. I'm saying, so let me understand this. You're wanting a guy who can't see, who doesn't drive very far, you're wanting him to drive 80 miles one way to do this while you get his stuff done. Well, that's what we say. And finally, we got some sense into them, and they let it happen. But yeah, telemedicine is something we got to work more on. We're doing a great job of it. We're actually doing a lot with that, but it helps. They can do it on their phone. Mental health think about this. We can't afford. There's just not enough room for a lot of group therapies. There's not a lot of room for sometimes counseling. But if we could get people more on our counselors from anywhere that they can talk to them and they can do the teleconsults and get these things done, we need to do more of that. We need to use our folks in the field. But then there's another aspect of this. It's not really talked about, but I'm exploring more and more. We are not unique. We're special because we get to just treat veterans. Okay, all your other hospitals have to treat anybody that walks in. We can only legally treat veterans. Okay, but that doesn't mean we can't be part of the system. So what we're looking at is DOD in particular, but we're also looking at putting our facilities with DOD facilities. So you have that crossover. Many of the DOD hospitals, for those of us who are younger, I guess 30 or 40 years ago, the hospitals on the bases were full. And they're a lot more active than they are today.
Yeah.
Nowadays they're not. Some of them are, but most of them are not. They have bed space, and we're getting ready. We got about 15 projects right now. After Pete and I sat down, the Secretary of Defense sat down and said we got to do more sharing. That we're actually looking to put our doctors or their doctors in those facilities to open up more space.
Okay.
Jacksonville is one of the areas we're looking at. Just to shout to Jacksonville, we're looking at doing this kind of stuff. So it cuts our costs, but also gets the veteran better care. But then I'm going to take it a step further. And this actually, I'm not claiming of ideas. Senator Tammy Duckworth, who we disagree on a lot of things, but I've known her since the House. She had an idea about co-locating CBOCs with rural hospitals. That's a great idea. I don't care where the idea came from. That's actually a really good idea.
Right.
So we're looking at some of these areas. Okay, can we take existing CBOCs or existing stuff and moving them closer? A lot of the rural hospitals, because of time and age, have space. Well, we're going to co-locate with them. We may have better equipment, which then helps that rural healthcare system. They can, we can move back and forth. We can give them back and forth referrals. They can come to us. They may have MRIs, CAT scan, but our veterans are getting helped. Our community's getting help, and the doctors are staying proficient. That's another issue with DOD. They don't see a lot.
Yeah.
Unless they're deployed, unless they're in hot combat, they're not seeing the stuff. So we're actually able to help them stay proficient in their skills as we are trying to stay proficient in ours.
Absolutely. And I mean, you mentioned caring about the veteran. That's displaying that you actually care about the veteran.
Yep.
Is doing what makes sense for these veterans. And I'm interested to hear you talk more about the DOD VA relationship,
Yep.
because in theory, the two should be in lockstep and they should
Yep.
talk. And it should be very easy when I transition out of the military, active duty, and I transition into the VA, that all my records follow me, all my medical records. And that's not the case.
No.
So, do you have plans to make that easier and make it more seamless?
Yes, and we're working on that. The VA has put itself in a hole. This is one of those times when I fully admit where we got some issues, and that's in our medical health records issue. When I got there in February, it was basically at a standstill. The previous administration basically had punted it, and we're not doing anything, paying billions of dollars, by the way, while we punted it. But again, I understand because they just couldn't come to an agreement. But I took a different approach. And so I sat down with Oracle, who is
Yes.
now in control of it. And they were talking about, we can get this done quickly. And I said, okay, let's be realistic. Let's look at what we can do, what you can do. And then it became, this is a classic case, okay? The VA's perspective, Oracle's perspective. So I did a little different. I said, okay, I'm going to get our VA employees in. So I got our guy who heads it up, Neil. And I said, okay, tell me all the problems and tell me what we can't do and why we can't do it. And he goes and he tells all the problems. I said, okay, thanks. Day later, I brought in Oracle. All their senior leadership shows up. And I say, okay, tell us what the problem is. Why are we still sitting here with 6 that don't work really? And we're almost 8 years into a multi-billion-dollar contract. And so they started griping and they started complaining. I said, okay. So we started learning. The next week, I brought them both together in our big conference room, and I had our folks and their folks, and I said, we're going to talk about this, and we're going to see if we can solve some problems here. It started off with that, we're always great to work with our partners. And I said, okay, this is a bunch of crap.
Let's cut it.
So I sat there in the middle of the room and I said, okay, here's what the deal. Neil, they're saying this about you. Oracle, they're saying this about you.
Just lay it right on the table.
Answer it. And it was like, I said, you better go now or I'm going to start. And so it ended up in a firm but heated conversation, which is exactly what needed to happen.
Yes.
And then I said, okay, we're now taking these bottom baseline, and y'all are going to meet in a room, and we're going to lock you in essence for until y'all come up with a solution. And I told Oracle, we're not going to be the problem, because they came to us with all these issues saying, well, we don't get this from VA. I said, no, as soon as y'all agree on 5 things, we're not going to be a problem. And I went to our group. We had 8 or 9 committees that then met with the committee, that then met with the final committee before they could give Oracle input. I said, well, number one, all those committees are gone. We're going to have one. It's going to be Neil and a couple others, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to standardize, because we're not going to all unique. We're not all 170. You're not going to get your own Baskin Robbins flavor. You're going to get the basic. You're going to get what we need, and we're going to. And it's amazing. After that meeting, we came back. They were going to do, I think it was 4 next year. We added 9 to the list. We're getting 13 next year. When then we're already setting up to get 20 to 25 maybe the next year. And if we can get our momentum rolling, even more. I tell you that long story that may bore you to tell you this. That is part of the transition issue.
Right.
Because getting those medical records is difficult. I like the way you talked about how VA and DOD should be intertwined. I call us fraternal twins. We just look different and act differently, but they deal in 2 different times. Transition is a problem, and that's the reason it sort of heightened to Pete and my discussion while we signed the memorandum of understanding about 3 weeks ago of how we're doing this, because transition is owned, so to speak, by DOD.
Right.
But yet I'm blamed for it.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
such a good point. Wow.
Yeah, you know, it's just like, okay. I mean, if I'm going to be blamed for it, let me at least have a chance to screw it up. You know?
Sure.
So what we're doing is we're working on areas that we hopefully may have more input into, and also in strengthening it on their end as well. Because in all fairness to DOD, it is a big part of what they should be doing. Mm-hmm. But if you're fighting a challenge to get lethality, warfighter, the end time is not where is going to be your main focus.
Right. Yeah. It's like you're leaving.
Yeah. Well, especially when we did like 18
VA.
months to plan your early, I had a senior NCO one time says, why should I worry about them getting there for 18 months? And if I don't get my next billet, I'm out in 90 days.
Sure.
Okay. Chief, you got a point.
Yeah.
Okay. Not a bad point. Some of the smartest folks in the world are senior enlisted. We don't list our senior enlisted.
That's another story for another day.
Believe me, I'm a colonel now, but I did my time from butter bar on up, and I knew that I was outranked for a long time.
That's right.
By those E-78, 89s. Mm-hmm. But we've got to transition it better. And also they got to understand, but also we got to do it differently. I'm sick of, still a military man, I am sick of death by PowerPoint. I think it's the bane of existence for not only most industries, but definitely the military.
Yes.
Here's my briefing for the day. In this briefing, I'm going to cover this, and this. And in this next slide, I'm going to explain why these are important, because here's the syllabus. I mean, I'm looking for a fork to stick in my leg. I mean, at this point, like, dear God.
Let's just sit down and have a conversation.
Yeah. Hey, guys, what do you want to do?
Right.
You got no education. Did you not get your 2-year degree while you were here? I know you spent too much time out here. We got to get you some skills to do this. And for the ones that I'm focused on first, and I'm developing a plan right now, is ours who are already diagnosed or already being treated in issues of traumatic brain injury, depression, PTSD, and I want those to be almost an automatic handoff.
Yes.
That there is a confidentiality. I understand this completely in the sense of HIPAA, but all we do is make sure that they're not handed off into nothing.
Right. Or
say, hey, go call the VA. No, we're going to have those folks in a much smoother system. Some of this happens. It depends on areas, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. That's it. But we're going to have a smoother system where here's the records. I'm an old IMA. If our listeners remember that, I'm still an IMA now, but used to be. But when I first got in, I carried my records everywhere.
Yes.
I felt like I was Dalton from Roadhouse.
Yes.
Here's my medical records. I got this here and this here, and my shots. Because back then, if you didn't have your shot record, guess what? You got them all again.
Yep.
They didn't care where you had them.
Right.
So you carried your map. Well, can we just do a similar kind of thing now, even if it's electronically? Mm-hmm. But that Jim gets out. Jim's been being treated in DOD Health. We're going to transfer Jim to VA Health, and it's a smooth, warm handoff. How much more could we save right there?
No, and then also, I mean, if you follow the breadcrumbs from transition, you, in a lot of cases, will end up with another one of your initiatives that you're putting a lot of energy towards, to my understanding, and that's our suicide problem. Because if you don't transition well, and then the VA doesn't have their hands around you, there's a good chance you're not going to get any help anywhere, and then you find yourself in a real bad place and ultimately take your life.
Yes.
So how do you think about the suicide epidemic that is still very prevalent among our veteran community, and what you want to do about that?
Bothers me every day. I wake up every day with this, and it's in it because now it's one of those for people who know me, and I personalize things because it is what I do. If you hear me say my veterans, my VA, my VA employees, and it's not because I'm being anything else except they're me. Now I take this very seriously. 17 to 22 can go higher, whatever statistic you want to use, especially in rural areas. But let's just use the 17 to 22 number. Half of those have never had a touch with the VA. Half, give or take. I wonder what goes through their mind when they served their country. They're hurting for whatever reason, even if it was what I say, choices of their own. But they come to a place where they don't want to live. But yet, the same country that they served undoubtedly is not in their forefront to actually get help. When they were in, they knew they could go to the first shirt. They could go to somebody. At least you had your buddies. They get out. They don't have that. I don't care where it comes from. And we spend a lot, over $500 million a year, quote, on prevention stuff. Not to be cruel, we're not reaching the right audience. And that's why, I'm here today. That's why I'm going on these other podcasts. I'm redoing how we're looking at this from an approach of saying, how do we get them to at least say, the VA, veterans, VA, get help. But then I want to I'm open, and I've sat down at the table with more nonprofits probably than my predecessor met in this entire time. And I understand they have a different focus. I'm not trying to be mean there. I respect the differences. I just say we got to do it differently. But when you don't use the tools that are available and tools that they'll actually use, there's a whole different issue there. I can give you all the tools, but if you don't want to pick any of them up, then I either can't help you or that tool's not right. So we're doing everything we possibly can to get out of this VA mindset of you got to come to us and we're going to diagnose you and we're going to sometimes just that call. It just is somebody they need to be with an organization. They need somebody that they get a purpose again. Remember, brokenness doesn't mean failure. Brokenness just means that you have an opportunity to spill out. I mean, this will be the old chaplain in me. There's a great passage in Scripture where and I've used my North Georgia paraphrase here. She comes to Jesus and she takes a bottle of very expensive perfume and she breaks it and pours it on him. And everybody gets upset. You spent all this money, you wasted it. And Jesus basically tells her, no, she did what she was supposed to. She knew what the moment was. The blessing, so to speak, and the purpose in that story did not come from somebody who was casual with what she had. Mm-hmm. It came from a broken vessel. I don't grow unless I'm challenged. I don't grow out of the pot. I'll stay in my pot unless that pot is broken and allows me to expand. Think about kids and think about folks that you went through maybe boot camp with or OCS with or anything, and you saw them when they started and they were given a challenge and they expanded to it.
Yes.
We've got to tell our veterans, you may be hurting. You may have lost your wife. You've lost your kids. You've went to a bottle too many times. You're taking too many pills, but it's never too late. Use that to give you the strength to get forward, to say, if I can live through this, I can get to another hope. And for me, that's all I want from the VA. That's all I want from us. That's all I want for us in our organizations. Let you understand brokenness is not broken. Brokenness is not failure. Brokenness is an opportunity to put it back together again and take the scar and go forward. I don't know how else to describe it.
I mean, I'm gonna say the same way we talk about community care when it comes to hospitals. Like, I am Evidence, running a large nonprofit for veterans. I had the opportunity to sit down with Secretary Collins, and I love how you put it. Like, the VA can't solve every veteran's problem. And if we're not working across the board with different organizations at the, from the medical perspective and from the healthcare perspective and from mental health and well-being. And so I shared through social media when I left your office, I left so optimistic about our conversation and about the way that you wanted to really work with community organizations that could meet veterans where they were.
Yep.
And, I get excited hearing you talk. I really do. And
certainly I echo that. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know that I've ever heard this level of passion from anybody who's been in your seat. So I'm encouraged, and I respect the heck out of it. And like, I'll use myself as an example when we talk about community care and meeting veterans where they are. I'm fortunate to be gainfully employed, so I have medical insurance through my employer, but I also am 100% service disabled. So in essence, I'm paying for insurance twice. I paid for it with my time in service and what it, eventually left me with and took from me, but then I'm also paying out of my paycheck. So is that an area that could be explored where I have my health insurance, for lack of a better explanation, through VA, and I can use that, on ZocDoc to find a local doctor around the corner from me?
It is to a point. I think there's a lot that I hear this a lot, using, there's actually a discussion in Congress right now about just give all the veterans the TRICARE for life kind of, and just send them out. Again, I understand the concept, but in some ways we already have this in a way if we're using the VA properly.
Okay.
In a sense of, and I'm not defending the VA in a sense of, we're the only ones doing it, but you got the hospitals, but also if community care is used properly, you got it right there.
Okay.
But also there's a way too for veterans to understand who have other health insurance and be a part. You're taking advantage of that. But then also there's a supplement that can be had using your benefits that you have with the VA. Sort of as a double check, if you would. But also remember, you're not always going to be gainfully employed. You're also not always going to be fit to where you want to go. The VA healthcare has got to be there at that point for you as well.
Right.
And because later in life you may not have the resources.
Sure.
You may not have. So I think it's just a balance, and I think we've got to do a better job of explaining what our capabilities are, what we are able to do. We're the largest healthcare organization in the world. We just have a specialized client, but we're also not unique. And I think this is the one. I think I started this a few minutes ago. I want to come back to it. We got to quit judging the VA as far as just its facility, its normal health operations, as if we're this unique organization. We're not. We're a healthcare organization.
Yeah.
We're just the largest. But and I hear this all the time, and members of Congress or whoever, they'll come out, or even veterans online, and say, "I've been waiting 3 weeks to get to see my doctor." Okay, well, I have private insurance. I'm not in the VA, and I'll look at my phone and I'll have my doctor call. And it'll be a note. Doctor's not going to be in today. We need to move your appointment.
Right.
Okay. Well, I don't call Newsweek and say, "Hey, my doctor just canceled. The healthcare system in this country is awful. The VA is going to hell in a handbasket." No. We have people go on vacation. And that doesn't mean we lower our standards, but I just got to have people understand that if, clinics, hospitals, and even here in New York or in Jersey or anywhere else, the private and public hospitals have the same problems recruiting doctors, nurses, people to clean rooms, LPNs, RPNs, that we do. And I actually have to do it at a disadvantage. I can't pay my doctors as much. I can't, some of our doctors literally are losing hundreds of thousands of dollars because they want to stay and work with veterans, and especially in our specialty stuff. So for us, I just want you to understand we're always going to do better, but let's be honest in our judging, and let's be honest in how we deal with this, because we're not going to treat you worse. In fact, many times we're better than the average in the public, and there's some we're not. I want us to realize when that happens, let the veteran decide. If they want to wait an extra week to come to the VA, then let them do it. But if they want to wait, or if it's the best medical interest for them to go to see their physician at home, let them do it. Let the money take care of itself. Members of Congress and administrations in the future should always look at it as how are we best taking care of it. As long as this country's making a commitment to veteran benefits earned, then we got to be willing to see the best way to carry that out.
How do we incentivize, though? Because I think, you say the VA is the largest healthcare company in the world, and it is. I also think that along with saying it's the largest, you want to say it's the best. we're the innovators.
Yep.
We are the ones that are best positioned to treat our veterans, you know? And so I think that would be the ultimate goal.
It is, and we are. And I think, and sometimes this gets hidden because we have to deal with all this other. We're the best in prosthetics. We're the best in spinal cord. You know, again, there's some other specialty folks out there that do it.
Yeah.
We have some of the best cancer treatments. We're for prostate in particular. There's a lot of things that we do. These are stuff we do well, and we've done well for years because of the multiple injuries, our dealing in especially in dealing with mental health issues or surrounding PTS, TBI, concussion, those kind of things. We're the ones that have done this and set a standard. Here's what really frustrates me as well. We're still at poly clinics where we have multiple injuries. We're having active duty DOD being treated in some of our clinics, and our veterans are having to go to other clinics to find, and I'm like, okay, we got to we know we're the best in it. We got to figure out how we can duplicate this better and quicker. So I don't want it to be, and unfortunately when you talk about VA, it's easy to get it. I try to always, and I'm glad we got into this conversation, say we are good at a lot of what we do. We're very good at a lot of what we do. But I spend so much time trying to fend off the stupid that we don't get enough time to talk about that stuff. And so I agree with you. We're not only, the largest, but we're the best. Are we going to be the best at everything? No. Neither is any hospital in this country.
Right.
But we're going to do our primary care good. We're going to make sure we're really helping our veterans on those normal, everyday stuff. We also, by the way, we need to get our veterans back in a preventive health mode.
Yep.
We're not there. And right
100%.
now it's showing so much in our aging population of Vietnam veterans, others. They're not walking, they're not moving, they're not lifting weight. And our 9/11, we're seeing this as well. They're getting out and they're not taking care of themselves. They're going to be much more high propensity for hypertension. They're much more propensity for kidney, diabetes, all these things, heart issues. So we got to get them back in. That's where we as a community, our nonprofits, our VSOs, I don't want to leave those out. They still have a very valued place in the VA, and all, not just the VA, but in our communities. But we all got to focus together on that.
And while you talk about focusing together, if I'm in the VA, how do I then connect to those VSOs and those other organizations that can kind of help VA do all this heavy lifting? How can I get directly connected to those?
Well, I think the biggest way is what we're trying to fund and get into our mindset in our clinics and in our vet centers and other things, is that we have options for people. And it's not just go down to the VA hospital and we'll say, no, well, there's VA hospital, but, and maybe they've had issues. Say, look, no, we have organizations out there that we already have partnership. That's why I'm meeting with the nonprofits. That's why I'm going to their events. That's why I'm listening to them and saying, okay, what do you offer? What do you not offer? What's your specialty? I love the fact that there was a lot of interest after 9/11 for organizations to pop up for everything.
Sure.
Okay. And there's been a lot. What happened is, and we and I talked about this as well, is that finally they became a realization, all of us can't do everything. And so now you're getting into the discussions, and Gary Sinise has been really great about this with his foundation, funding different sources, so to speak.
Yeah.
With your foundation and others. He's saying, okay, here's what we do. Here's what Boulder Crest does. Here's what Wounded Warrior does. Here's what Tunnels Towers does. And there's many more out there. I'm not leaving you out because I don't love you. Okay, I just I have limited mental capabilities here this morning. But I'm not going to, and I'm never going to name everybody. We could, but finding those ways and giving our folks the ability to say it's okay to refer. It's okay to say, hey, these folks are doing some good stuff. Now, I also don't want it to happen. I want us to get better in areas instead of just simply saying, oh, we'll go out there and they'll fund it and and we don't have to pay for it. No, we're going to be in partnership with our foundations. We're going to be in partnership with these groups. So I think the biggest way that we're doing is we're going to be promoting it in many ways through social media, through our interactions with them. You'll see me. I'm not going to endorse any nonprofit. I can't do that from my position or anything else. But I can also say, hey, these folks are good. That's some good stuff. They got some good things here. Try this out. Because if we don't use an all approach instead of a filtered approach, we're not going to reach the people we need to reach.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also one of the things we talked about when we met is it's also on us, the nonprofit partners, at the Travis Manning Foundation, we're going to make sure to be checking with our membership, with our community to say, are you enrolled with the VA?
Yeah.
You know, and that's
a
important.
big key right there.
Yeah.
The great part about it, from my perspective, I'm not worried. I want to have, we got 14 million veterans roughly, eligible kind of if we do our veteran population as we look at it. But we're servicing about 9. Like I said, we have enrolled about 9, but that number's actually dropped. So just a few years ago, it was almost 15, 16 million. So we're losing World War II in particular. We're losing Vietnam. So as you look at this, how do you make sure that we're getting them enrolled and getting that? So we go back to that suicide number. If they're not even have a touch of someone, then maybe they do need just some basic preventative care. Maybe they just do need to go see somebody. That's where our nonprofits can help us say, look, we're going to help you. We're here to be, but have you signed up for your benefits that you've earned? And we're going to make it simple enough. Now, this is another big topic for me. We trip ourselves up every day. We have too complicated a process to get in the VA. We have too complicated a process. I've used this example over and over again, and we're going to get it changed hopefully very soon. We have a whole page on our benefits application, disability benefits application, and if you filled it out, you know what I'm talking about, in which we ask for your military history. I don't need your military history. You filled that out on the first page when you have your name, your social security number, and show me your DD-214. I can get anything I want for you.
Sure.
Okay? Unless you're pre-73, which we had to fire. But even then, we can get you. Why do I need you going through a list and getting you frustrated?
Right.
Because then so many folks just give up and they're
like,
oh, that's too much.
They give up. For me, unfortunately, I couldn't give up. But, having to go back in, for anybody in the military who's had to do their security background checks, I thought those were just, those were painful until I became a cabinet member. And they went back till I was 18.
Wow.
You find anything good?
No, not really.
Okay.
Been interesting. But they asked me to where I was at.
Oh, wow.
Let me. I lived at home until the day I was married. I got married in 21, and we moved out. What jobs did you have? And they wanted me to put an employer or reference. I don't even remember where it was at. So it's like, it was really interesting for me to sit there and say, well, why would I ask somebody who maybe is getting in their 60s or 70s who already is having issues?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then they have to go through this process.
Got to make it easy.
And then you go out and we say, well, I got all these organizations to help. Well, there's a reason that, no. The VA should be simple enough for a veteran of any age to apply, get an answer, and be served.
Well, right. And I think that's part of maybe the challenge of reaching the post 9/11 veterans is because now, with these phones that everybody carries around and everyone's pretty adept with, they're confident and comfortable finding other ways to go find that information. Whereas previous generations, they didn't know any different. They're like, all right, I serve, then I go to the VA. Because I know plenty of older veterans, they've been going to the VA forever.
Yeah.
But younger veterans, like, well, I'm not going to do that because I've heard all the bad stories and I can find something on my phone. After
we left, because we talked about like making sure that our membership is enrolled in the VA, right? I just started talking to veterans, people that work with me. I mean, not good, but like people that are in senior leadership at my organization that are retired service members. Are you enrolled at the VA? Nope. And I'm like, wait, what? And it was this kind of every veteran I'd been talking to since I left your office, all of my friends, are you enrolled with the VA? Nope. And I was astonished because I thought everybody was enrolled in the VA. I could not believe how many of my friends, post 9/11 veterans, are not enrolled in the VA.
Well, one, they don't need to think it's for them. Okay, and this goes back to our transition issue earlier.
Yes.
I was sitting at one of the most telling meetings I've had in the last couple of months. I was sitting in Tampa, and we had the medical folks there at McDill, and we had our BBA folks, our benefits folks. And it was amazing to listen to the conversations. And I turned at one point and talked to the benefits disability riders who were there. I said, how many of them come to you and they have absolutely no clue about what they're doing? And one guy looked at me and said, all of them.
Yeah.
I said, and this was coming from some of the transition folks that were there on the base, and they were talking about the health side of this, but the benefit, they don't know. And again, this is a sensitive subject for some. and I want to address this because I see it on the socials, I see it among the message boards, I see this kind of stuff. Quit forcing us veterans to, go get stuff that we feel like victims. Go make sure that you get all the benefits you got in forcing this kind of stuff. No, I'm not forcing anything on you, but you've earned it.
Right.
Okay. If you want the benefit, okay, that you've earned, then let us help you.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ever make you feel demeaned. I'm not going to make you feel that you're taking something from the system. There's this military ethos. Take care of my brother first.
Yes.
And
yes.
I'm as that as anybody else.
Yes.
But you have yourself to take care of too. So there's enough to go around. We got enough folks. But yeah, it is. It's that we don't know the benefits there, number one. Number two, we've heard the bad stories. Number three, we read stupid stuff like the New York Times, New York Post, all these articles that they may have. The Post actually has been helpful. But you got the Times, Washington Post, Guardian, ProPublica. I'm going to call you out. And every week we do this kind of crap that are telling our veterans, feeding them crap, keeping them from doing stuff that they could actually get with the VA. So we just got to continue to force it out there.
So is that your biggest hurdle?
Yeah.
Just communication?
Yes. And changing a culture. And I can't give one speech and change a culture.
No, sure.
So that's why I'm on the road a lot. That's why I'm discussing it. You ought to see the meetings that I have in hospitals, and I love my hospital folks. I really do. They think honestly, and we have a staff member here as well, and he's seen a lot of this as well. I come into some of these meetings, they honestly think that I have horns because they've been said, Collins is wanting to cut 83,000 people out of the VA. We've not fired any of them. Okay. Reorganization point that we may look at later, but we've done none of this. We've been lied about. I mean, I had a senator the other day who was in a speech in her home state. The VA's already fired 7,000 people. No, we haven't. What do you own?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but
misinformation.
It is just misinformation. So I go into these meetings. And you got the medical center director. You got all the chief staffs. All of them are sitting around and they bring their PowerPoints and I've told them early on, do not do that. I can read your fluff stuff anytime I want to. I said I want to know what's actually happening. It takes about 2 or 3 minutes, and if they're not talking, then I have to give them the speech about why I'm there and that I don't. I'll take care of and we start actually having a conversation. They've gotten better and better over time because they realize that they bring up a point and I'll solve it. We had one of our facilities talked about a credentialing and privileging issue. I got my chief of staff on the phone in the meeting and said, this got to get fixed. Well, it's got fixed. In fact, we just sent out the memo. It took longer than I wanted to, by the way, because I had to get really ill about people. But we're putting out the memo, I think, either today or yesterday that we put out, fixing that situation. They brought it down to where we could do it very easily to transfer our people. They started seeing I was actually serious about what I was talking about.
Yeah.
By the end of the meeting, it's like, well, he isn't such a bad guy that I've heard after all. I may not still like him. He may be still sort of homely, but, he's not, he's not what I thought he was.
Right, but you might also be the victim of the sins of your predecessors.
Could be. Okay. I don't want to, look, you want to talk about the epitome of waste of my time? Go in and give me a fluff report about your hospital.
Sure.
I could give a rip. Mm-hmm. Because number one, it's the only thing we're ever perfect on in our life is a resume.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay? Nobody's perfect. And that's okay. When do we get out of this? I got to get the VA out of this mentality that it's okay to admit we don't do stuff good. There's stuff we do great, but there's stuff we don't do good. Mm-hmm. Admit it. Mm-hmm. Because it's the first step of every meeting. Admit you have a problem.
Right.
And then let's fix it.
And let's fix it.
Yeah.
Don't wallow in it. Don't whine about it. Fix it. Mm-hmm. So this is really, for me, it's been good to go to these places. But that's the culture change that I talked about. Culture is what comes out of the end of the tube. Mm-hmm. It's not the tube. It's not the thing. But you got to force that through.
Right.
And so and it was funny, after the first couple of meetings, you heard the standard line in the first couple of hospitals I went to. Well, the VA is this. After they've heard me speak for a while, and then the first words out of my mouth are, "It's the veteran first. It's not the." It's amazing how many mimic that line now.
Sure.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Because as long as you believe it,
yeah,
and you start implementing it, you can copy me all day long.
Well, and that's the thing is they got to, the actions have to follow. I had a coach in college. Actually, you might know him. He spent time in Georgia Tech. Bobby Ross. Mm-hmm. He used to say, proof's in the pudding. Mm-hmm. So, you can put together nice PowerPoints, or in your case, no PowerPoints, because you don't want to see those PowerPoints. Thankfully, I think that's a great idea because the amount of PowerPoints we sit through in the military that are just pointless. Like, I can read. You could give me this and I could read it.
Don Rumsfeld, and if you ever want to read a really good book about leadership meetings, read Rumsfeld Rules. Okay, he wrote this.
I have a signed copy.
Oh, it is a good one. And I read back through it occasionally just to remind myself. And one of the things is, and I'm glad that I've learned it because I'm reading back through the lessons again. He's talked about that we have meetings now and these are hospital meetings or ones like that. My staff meetings are one of these that they don't know what I'm going to ask. And I don't want you to read me a PowerPoint. Right. I can read. I've been able to read since I was about 5 years old. Okay? I don't need to read. I want to see if your mind works.
Yes.
That's missing among a generation. Now, you want to get me started on a whole different issue. We're missing a generation that thinks.
Yes.
Because our older generation has allowed us to. And so I want to see if you can put 1 and 1 and get not necessarily 2. Maybe you can say 1 and 1, and I say, well, 2 is the answer, but 4 works better. Not because 1 and 1 is not 4, but to say, why don't we change the equation?
Yes.
I want to see how you think. Mm-hmm. And I've told this to over and over, every group I speak to at the VA. Make mistakes. Make mistakes. No, but I will not let you be fired at the VA for making an honest, legitimate mistake trying to do something better. I will come and pick you up, dust you off, and put you back in the game. Now, if you want to be stupid and do stupid stuff and make mistakes, you're going to get fired because we're not going to handle non-accountability at the VA. That's over. Mm-hmm. You're not failing up at the VA anymore. I've been real popular on that one. But we would do it. They couldn't run a department, so we gave them another department. No. If you can't run one, you can't bloom where you're planted. We're not going to give you, we're not going to let you go screw up something. You're going to learn how to do it better or you're not moving. Mm-hmm. So we just got to think better. Yeah. We just got to think outside the box.
Bloom where you're planted. That's a great Colin Powell quote. Yeah. That's where I know it from.
I have to shift real quick because I want to make sure that we talk about this because this was the one thing that came in through questions on social media to my account and also conversations that we've been having a lot with veterans. And you talked about it briefly when you went over to the Bronx Hospital,
yep.
The MDMA
yes.
and psychedelics.
Yes.
And I'd love to know what you're thinking about that. I can tell you that the veterans that I'm talking to are huge proponents. Mm-hmm. We have had veterans on our show mm-hmm. that have talked about the life-changing effects of MDMA. But what I hate hearing is that they're traveling down to Mexico yes. and doing these treatments.
And sorry, really quickly, so I'll just expound on that a little bit because I think also in conjunction with that is the predisposition of people to go into VA and expect to just get prescribed a bunch of medication. It's like, hey, I have this problem. And I mean, I can tell you years ago, first time meeting a doctor and having a 5-minute conversation and the doctor saying, well, I'll write you a prescription for this. And I said, well, I don't know that I want to take that. Right. But that was the answer.
Yep.
So what do you say to that?
Yeah, number one, we need to get out of a medication solution to everything. Okay. Well, I think we're a generation that has been bombarded with ads and we've been bombarded with everything that this pill will solve your problem. Pills do not solve life's problems. Some help, some make you better, but they don't solve everything. Mm-hmm. We can't treat everybody who has a bad day with a pill. Sometimes we need to give them the tools to turn a bad day to get better.
Sure. Can't treat homelessness with
Can't treat homelessness with a pill. You can't do those things. But we see it a lot. And so it's a mindset differential. And a lot of our folks, I'll say, are overwhelmed. A lot of our counselors, they're just like in everywhere else. They're overwhelmed. And our folks have bigger issues sometimes than the general public have issues. There's just a difference there. So I think we've got to how we deal with that better. But then, getting to the psychedelics, the first and foremost thing is I'm the first secretary of VA that's actually, that I know of that said, hey, we're willing to look at this and we want to expand it. Okay. There's a bias inside the VA that we were not going to fund research or fund projects. That's ending. We're going to look at anything that matters. And also at HHS with Bobby Kennedy, we've had this conversation mm-hmm. and FDA, because some things that we need to make very clear. Number one, it's not going to solve everybody's problems.
Sure.
So even everybody going to Mexico or wherever, please hear me. It's not. There's some that's just not. And my big concern with going to get what we have seen, and I'm not discounting anybody's experience. Mm-hmm. That's not my job. But what we have seen work long term is at least in the studies that I've seen, is treatment, counseling.
Yeah.
Treatment,
Sure.
counseling.
Right.
And I'm afraid sometimes to just go get the treatment, so to speak.
Well, that's what's offered now. That's
Yeah.
what, it's like go to Mexico, but then they come back and they can't come to VA and say, I just got Ibogaine. I just did an Ibogaine treatment. Now,
Yeah, help me out because there's no
Yeah.
way to do that. And also, frankly, we also got to be very honest about what some of these drugs are for.
Sure.
And Ibogaine has a lot of benefits. It's mainly an addictive issue benefits. There's been some with PTS and some with TBI, but there's others like MDMA that are better for that. Psilocybin, I don't pronounce that well.
Psilocybin.
There we go. my southern gets in the way there. Just mushrooms, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
And some others that we're looking at there. And then we also still have the cannabis issue. Oh, well, cannabis helps in certain areas. I think it's putting in a proper perspective, but us giving the outlet. Goes back to your question a little bit. If there's no other outlet for them to find it, they're going to go wherever they've heard.
Exactly.
Their buddy said online, hey, we got this. We went down there and it worked. So that's why we're working this way. Now, we are bound by a couple of things. We can't just open up. These have got to be sponsored clinical trials. The law keeps us from some of this because of how it's scheduled. Okay? We're getting the data we need, at least from my perspective, to say, yes, more and more needs to be done here because we are seeing good results. Just like I said, in the Bronx yesterday, phenomenal results. I've been at Emory, similar situation, phenomenal results. They're doing it differently too, by the way, which is interesting to see. Some do more treatment, some do only one treatment, but they're still seeing it's a similar. They're talking about how it opens up a receptivity toward what the problems were, and sort of do it in a sort of sequenced kind of event. So it's really interesting to see how that works. So for all of you out there, keep abreast. We're going to do as much as we can. It's not going to solve everybody's problem, and I know that's harmful to some. I know that's like, well, then I'll just go get my treatment. All I'm saying is, God bless you. You know what you're going to do for yourself, but also say that there's some of us working to make more and more opportunities available for those who really need it, and I want them to have that ability. I may not ever take it. I may not ever be a part. I've never done, frankly, any drugs. So I mean, it's just for me. It's not. But that doesn't mean if it doesn't help people that we can't have it. And so for me, I just want anybody listening to this podcast, anybody to know, it's not everybody's solution. It's not a random, we're all going to just be use drugs all the time. No, there's a formula to it. And I think that's the big issue to get you healthy. So many times, I think we get the idea that we're going to keep you unhealthy. And I don't mean it in those words.
Yeah.
No, I'm looking to get you healthy again.
Sure.
And so I think that's where we're at. So that for all who ask about the question, that's where we're at.
I mean, I think that's huge. I think just the idea that the VA is looking into the benefits, just that in itself, because for a long time it was just shut down.
Right.
As a no way, absolutely not. And so to hear that you are doing clinical trials, research, and interested to see the results of it. Because again, I'm giving anecdotal data from the veterans that I deal with on a daily basis, but I see change veterans who went to the VA, who became addicted to opioids because that's what they were prescribed, and then went down and Ibogaine, ayahuasca,
Whatever.
And came back not addicted. I'm
not, and look, and I think one thing, look, you also have to understand that there's very much of I'm also going to be very brutally honest. There's still not a consensus on the Hill.
Sure.
For this?
Yeah.
Even the doctors who are in the Hill, especially, there's not a consensus even, for the most part in administrations, and it doesn't matter, across the board. But there is enough here, and this is why I'm being very careful in how I'm saying this.
Yeah.
Because I don't want anybody, we're looking at it, we're open to it, we're seeing the results. Because like I say, the Bronx hadn't had in all these clinical trials I've done, they don't have a 100% success rate.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's something to think about.
But nothing does.
Nothing does. But so does that mean that, not everybody can take penicillin?
Does
that mean that we don't give it to anybody who can't?
Right.
No.
Right. But there should be a consensus, I would think, to explore new avenues of approach. You would hope, because
You would hope.
You would hope, because I understand that not everyone's, and we'll use the MDMA as the example, not everyone will ever come together and say, yes, that's an answer and agree on that. But when things have been a certain way in the VA for so long, there should be a consensus to say, like, well, all right, let's try something different.
Well, that's been my argument for the whole thing is let's what are we, for all the discussion in many other areas of follow the science. Okay, I'll follow the science. Mm-hmm. Just let me follow the science here, because I see what's happening. And it's not just in the VA. VA has, I think we have 11 or 12 trials going on, most of which we're participating with because of the restrictions that we have. MDMA is one that we're part of, but we're having to do it in that way. So that's more, and we've had these going on for several years now. We're starting to see some results. But also, I'm going to other places that have clinical trials going with this, and we're seeing a similar result. In fairness, the sampling is still growing, so we're still, but it's very, very promising at this point. So I'm very happy to continue this as we go forward, as long as everybody understands. We can't storm the hill and say, just open up. Number one. Two, from this perspective, you also have to have the professionals to do it.
Sure. And
some of our folks, we got to get them trained. We're doing that as best we can under these programs. But we got to make sure we have them properly trained in how we're doing it so that we get that.
Yeah, and I think this is an example, at least how I feel, where our generation, the post 9/11 generation, our Achilles heel as it relates to VA could also be our greatest strength. And what I mean by that is we rally around one another. Mm-hmm. So the same way that we've all rallied around and told all our buddies, like, hey, avoid the VA. Go to Mexico City and do MDMA. We've done all these things. We could, I won't say easily, but we could, in theory, flip that around and say, like, hey, let's all get together and work with VA and listen to VA.
Well, I just, look, I don't ever ask to be trusted without verification. And all I'm saying is out there, I would just challenge anybody, and we can have this argument about, do we have employees and how many employees we have. I'm just saying the proof's in the pudding. We've added all these employees that added a lot of money. We didn't get a better result. So maybe we ought to think of something different. And that doesn't mean we're ever going to. We've just emptied 350,000 positions from even being sort of considered, because we're not going to get rid of doctors and nurses and everybody else, although they're lying about that. I mean, we've had people actually say, we're cutting 15% out of one hospital. You're an idiot. No, we're not cutting 15% out of one hospital. So these are the kind of things we fight through. But I say that to then say, I go to any VSO, any of our veterans, service, VFW, DAV, American Legion, and our nonprofits, to say, tell me something that I'm not advocating for and fighting every day that you've not been doing for 20 years. Tell me. Mm-hmm. Well, and most of them will say, well, no, we said, why are you upset? We're trying to do exactly what you've been advocating: better care, better, quicker service. It's not about your organizations. It's about a veteran. Even outside the VA, it's not about us. But all of the organizations, you don't have an organization without the veteran itself. And so it goes back to saying, what are we doing for the veteran? So for me, rallying around this, come help me. Don't be checked out of this process. I need your help at the VA. The way the Vietnam era vets changed the VA, literally, because they came back. They necessarily wasn't ready in many ways. Mm-hmm. If you talk to the Vietnam vets, they'll tell you that 70s and 80s time, it were not good.
No.
It was the Vietnam vets. The vet centers are a direct result of Vietnam. They weren't getting the treatments that they needed. They weren't getting the counseling. They weren't having the thing. So wouldn't it be great for now this generation to put their mark? It's your time. You raised your hand of service. It's yours. Mm-hmm. Help me out.
Absolutely. Well,
I think that's a good place to end.
It is a good place to end.
Yeah.
Really quickly, totally off topic, just because you mentioned a few.
Oh, no.
I just need to know, what are your top 3 favorite military movies?
Military movie. Oh, gracious. Patton, Great. Full Metal Jacket, Stripes.
Okay. I mean, I
can name 10. I can name 10.
Of course, but those are 3 good ones.
Oh, good.
I like that. All right, well, we've taken more than enough of your time, but I think that's also indicative of the direction I think you want to go, that you're willing to have these conversations, and you're not just going to give a 5-minute soundbite interview and move on your way to your another. 10 meetings that you have
No.
today. You sat down, you heard us, you spoke with us. For that, I'm grateful. Listening to you, I'm encouraged for the direction the VA is going.
Good.
So, sir, thank you very much
I
for your
appreciate it.
time.
Yeah.
Thank you for your service. And let us know how we can help moving forward.
We'll keep going forward. Thank y'all. Appreciate
Thank you
it.
so much.
Thanks.
All right. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed listening to that as much as I enjoyed having that conversation. That hour plus went by very quickly. He was, as you heard, a very personable individual, very easy to talk to. Ryan, what were your thoughts after we wrapped the interview and you kind of had some time on your way home to think about everything that was said?
Yeah, that was my second time meeting with Secretary Collins. But of course, first time interviewing him. Listen, I think there's going to be people that say we didn't go hard enough. I think there's going to be, why didn't you ask this question? I think what we did is we were able to show his character, and I think that's huge. I think you're able to see that he is someone who deeply, deeply cares about our veterans. And I felt that. And I hope you felt that listening to the interview. And, it's again, when I first met with him, I said I walked away optimistic that there were going to be changes made. I continue, and I even feel more that way after sitting down and interviewing him. So I'm a big fan. Yeah. And it was an honor and a privilege to be able to share that time with him.
Yeah, I guess at this point now, I've really paid attention to who the secretary was, for 20 plus years now, just given my background. And it's the first time I felt like it's somebody who actually cares about having the role and not just somebody who took the job because they think it might be good for them or it's nice to be in a president's cabinet. It genuinely, felt like he cares and wants to make changes. You hit the nail on the head. No matter what was said in that conversation, there will be people that will not change their mind on how they feel about VA. And I'm sorry to those people. Anybody on any topic who is so unwilling to just hear someone out and potentially change their mind, there's nothing that can be said to those people that will be worth the breath in our lungs. So to those people, I'm sorry. Hopefully everybody came out of the conversation with that same belief, because that's how I felt as well, Ryan. Like, I have a lot of optimism, and I think it's interesting that he's the first post 9/11 veteran to serve in this role, but I think that also gives him a very unique perspective. Granted, he aged himself in the beginning of the conversation, so I'm not insulting the man. He's on the older end of the post 9/11 veteran era. So hopefully between that age, that wisdom, he will be able to affect change. But what I liked so much about the conversation was the fact that he's willing to listen to people. He's willing to do things differently. He's tired of the status quo of like, well, that's just how we've always done it, which I think is a trap that so much of our government falls into, and, in all different corners of our government. It's just like, well, that's just how it's always been done. It's like, well, but why do we keep doing it then if it stinks? So listen, relative to the role, he's still super new. He's still, I think, in a fact-finding mode, but he's doing a great job, and he's willing to go places like our show, Barstool Sports, to potentially reach a whole faction of veterans that have never heard from the Secretary of VA in an honest manner before, and have only read headlines and not gotten to know the individual. So overall, I'm just very grateful to Secretary Collins for joining us, for giving us as much time. It wasn't like, hey, you got 10 minutes, figure it out. Because obviously you couldn't have a real conversation in 10 minutes. So the fact that we got as much time as we did, and really, I thought went pretty deep on a lot of different topics. There was not enough time in the day. We could have probably talked to the man for another 2-3 hours if he had nothing else to do. But the fact is, he is a busy guy. We're very grateful that he gave us that much time. And as we said, I'm hopeful. So with that, any caveats, anything that we missed, Stans, we'll start with you.
Just circling back to the beginning of the episode, the correct pronunciation of Iran in English is Iran. So
okay, well, now you know. Now
Yeah.
you don't bring that to your next cocktail party, folks.
Yeah,
Sounds smart.
Let's help you out.
There you go.
I got nothing.
Okay. I would like to mention a gentleman that passed away 2 days ago. Marine Fred Smith, the founder of FedEx, passed away.
I did not see that anywhere. Wow.
Yeah,
Is
that
the
should have been bigger
Commanders?
news, I feel like.
I literally, that's wild. Well, he wasn't
Yeah.
that old, was he?
No, he was pretty old.
Was
Let's
he?
see. I think he was 80. He was,
Okay.
yeah, he was 80. Yeah, he
I
died
mean,
at
I
80
knew.
years old.
Wow. Wow. I mean, he is literally talked about as, somebody, I mean, look what he did. What an entrepreneur.
Yes.
And yeah, and he's given a lot to the veterans community through FedEx. So, wow. That's sad to hear.
Some interesting facts that I found to be noteworthy. He had 10 children, which is
I did not
I
know
think
that
rare to have
either.
that many children.
Yeah.
Very decorated. He had a Silver Star, Bronze Star, 2 Purple
Yep.
Hearts from his 2 tours of duty in Vietnam. I encourage you to go read his Silver Star citation. It's just very, very brave what he did as a platoon leader. He is an Ivy League guy. He commissioned out of Yale, but he credits his time in the Marines as really basically what allowed him to make FedEx work. And all the principles he learned in the Marine Corps and in Vietnam, he said he leaned on more than anything he learned from his Ivy League education. Just impressive, I think, because FedEx almost wasn't. In the first 2 years, it nearly went belly up, and he was able to rescue it from the jaws of defeat and turned it into what we know today, which is a behemoth of an organization that just runs like a well-oiled machine, and it's something that so many of us, if not all of us, rely on at one point or another.
Through blackjack.
What's that?
Through blackjack. That's the
Yeah.
famous story. Fred Smith, his last $5,000 the company had, he reportedly took to Vegas and won 27 grand, kept the company afloat for another month, and then it kept rolling.
Well, good
Pretty
for
cool.
him.
Yeah.
I love that. All right, that's going to do it for us this week. Again, thank you to Secretary Collins and his whole team. We also got to mention his team because they were awesome. His chief of staff, his head of media relations.
They were great.
I won't mention their names in case they don't want me to, but they were very easy to work with, very, very cordial, very nice people. And I think that also speaks to him, right? I think when people have individuals on their staff who are jerks, I think you got to be a jerk to hire jerks, right? So I think that speaks to him that he hired nice, good people that are trying to do a good thing. And I was really touched by the one individual that we worked with, and Ryan, that you ultimately brokered the relationship with, and her story and why she's working for Veterans Affairs. It was really very, very impressive. And just the whole team, the whole experience was just, I'm sorry, I'm rambling, it feels like, but I'm just like so enthused about that conversation and the work that I think he's going to do along with his staff. So
And
we'll have to wait and see.
also kudos to us for having the first cabinet member on any Barstool podcast, right?
Yeah,
So-
people forget, like, that's a cabinet member in the president's cabinet is an impressive get. So
Yeah.
like, let's pat ourselves, and I'll give Ryan credit for making this happen. So thank you very much, Ryan, for using your juice, as we like to say, to make this happen. So thank you very much. So, all right, with that, we'll keep an eye on everything going on in Iran and the days ahead. But everybody, take care. Make it a great week.